They'll get to hear me mumble around, not swear. I'm not swearing today. I'm controlling myself. Or not. We'll see. We'll see how I do it. Okay. So if you look at the syllabus, there we go. Okay, if we look at the syllabus, we can see the questions. The questions are right. And that's discussions, exploration of the topic. That's not right. Where are the questions? Oh, they are. Okay, research article questions. Let me see if I can make that bigger. No, can't. Okay. There are the questions that I want you to answer. You need to just write the title of the article. And the title of the article is obviously for this one is Cardiovascular and Testosterone Responses to Contested Dominance in Women is the article. And that's all you need. You need to write the title of the article. Then you need to give a brief summary of the article. You've already got a brief summary right here. It's called the abstract. But what I want you to prove to me is that you understand what the article is about. So if you read the abstract, you should be able to synthesize that information and tell me what it's about. Okay. I don't want you to copy the abstract. But you're going to be giving me the same information that's in the abstract. You're just going to be doing it in your own words. Okay. And maybe you won't understand the abstract. I think I read this the first time and there was a couple words in there that I was going, really? What does that mean? Anyway. This is kind of an interesting article. Okay, let's go to the next question. It's really an interesting article. Well, it was for me anyway. What was the hypothesis or research question? The research question should be in the abstract. In there someplace is the question they're trying to answer. And it may be in the first sentence, and this one it is. Cardiovascular and testosterone responses of dominant and submissive women to an acute stressor. So they were trying to find out how an acute stressor affected dominant and submissive women. They measured their testosterone. So they were trying to find out if, in men, we know that testosterone, the higher your testosterone level, the more dominant you are. So they wanted to find out if it was the same way in women. This is an old research. As I said, it's 30 years old. But they needed to know if that was true of women as well as men. So this is one of the first pieces of research they did dealing with that. This is out of Wake Forest University, as you can see. All of the authors are from Wake Forest. So what was the hypothesis question? Hypothesis question was looking at cardiovascular and testosterone responses. Are dominant women, do stressors cause, change the dominance and submissiveness of women? And of course, they also measured testosterone in there. What type of study was it? Was it a qualitative study, a quantitative study, or a mixture of both? Usually you can find that in the abstract. In this case, it's a quantitative study. I know that because I read the article. It's a quantitative study because they're measuring testosterone in these women. And if they measure something, if they're measuring something, it's a quantitative study. Sometimes it's a mixture between the two. Describe how the study was conducted. We can find that out in the method. So in the method, we see that they took 20 women, 10 who were dominant and 10 who were submissive. They were undergraduate women. They were randomly selected from 100 students. Okay, so what did they do to them? They looked at a lot of different things. They made sure that the individuals weren't on oral contraceptives. Any idea why oral contraceptives would change the results?
Mess with maybe the pH balance or something?
They mess with their hormones, yeah, so it might mess with their testosterone level at the same time. One of the things we know now, of course, after this study was done, we looked at testosterone in women, and one of the things we discovered was they they have testosterone too. But of course, it's affected by the other hormones that they have. Come on, okay. My computer does not like to stand for some reason. Okay, there we go. All right, so here we're looking at the questions. Okay, so what type of a study was it? It was a quantitative study. Describe how the study was conducted. So what did they do to these women? 30 minutes were allowed to pass before baseline data were collected. What did they do to them? Oh, they drew blood. Blood withdrawal and testosterone determination. Brachial venipuncture was performed using a sterile indwelling butterfly catheter that was affixed to non-pyrogenic. Anyway, they drew blood from their arm, okay? Blood was extracted into a tube, and they measured the testosterone level in these women. Cardiovascular measure, they measured their heart rate, their diastolic blood pressure, and their arterial pressure. Okay, so that's what they were doing. They were measuring their cardiovascular response, and they were also measuring their testosterone level. So that's how the test was conducted. The higher the testosterone level, the more dominant they were, I guess. Is that what they're going to say? Let's read the abstract. Where's the abstract? Oh, here it is. Examine cardiovascular and testosterone responses of dominant and submissive women to an acute stressor involving contested dominance. 20 students were rated for their dominance to a redefined reference group. Participated in a task that involved debating with a trained technician and were continuously divided with bogus feedback throughout the task concerning biochemical substances in their blood that purportedly covaried with dominance. Covariance analysis revealed that dominant women were much more reactive to the stressor in several cardiovascular parameters than those classified as submissive. Serum testosterone did not vary as a function of the experimental manipulation, and at each measurement point, dominant and submissive subjects had essentially identical serum levels of this hormone. Interestingly, however, baseline testosterone for the dominant group was related to changes in systolic blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure. Okay, all right. So they created stressors for these women, and then they measured their blood pressure. And what they discovered was that testosterone had to do with dominance. It didn't have to do with, and it didn't change. So it was a constant as far as these women were concerned. They didn't have an increase of testosterone. This is one of the things that we see in women that we don't. This is one of the things that we see in women that we don't see in men. Men, their testosterone will change, and it's because they have testicles. And the testicles produce a lot of testosterone. And I'm giving you, telling you another story other than what's in the article. Okay. Okay. So if we were going to a football game and we wanted our team to win, of course our testosterone level would go up. Okay. Well, ours, meaning males. If you're a female, of course, it doesn't happen that way. So women don't have the same reaction to competition that men do.
I don't know, man.
No, they don't. Well, sure, but it has to do with their cardiovascular system, and that's what this article's all about. They were trying to determine if their testosterone changed as well. Sorry. Somebody's trying to borrow money.
Is this just an example, or we give us an article every week, or we have to go get it?
Oh, you have to find your own, so whatever's interesting to you.
So we don't do this one?
You can do that one if you want. We'll all do it together. And then you can turn it in for your first one. Okay, just the three of you. Okay. So what's going on? We're answering questions. So we've answered 2 questions. The third question we have to answer, or the next question that we have to answer once I get rid of this thing, is how does this study work? And in this study, of course, they were looking at cardiovascular levels. They're also looking at testosterone levels. I know exactly what you're talking about. Women, their testosterone level's fairly constant. It's fairly stable. And that makes them either submissive or dominant. If you have a dominant woman and they get real excited about a football game, it is mostly their cardiovascular system that's reacting. Males, especially if their team wins, their testosterone level skyrockets. But of course, you've got a more variable testosterone level. Your testicles are producing testosterone on a continual basis. And the reason, this doesn't have anything to do with this article, but the reason is because males are always competing for reproductive rights. And we're talking about in our anthropologic past. We're not talking about, and maybe at a bar, the more dominant guy is the guy that goes home with whoever he wants to. But of course, anthropologically, the individual that was the more dominant was the one that got to reproduce more than anybody else. And we are animals. We're just like other animals, and that's the way they react as well. Females, not the same thing. They just have a cardiovascular reaction, and that's what this article proved, that they have a cardiovascular reaction and their testosterone level didn't really change. How about that? Okay. So that's what the study's all about, and that's what you would put in that paragraph. The paragraph describing what happened in this article. They were trying to measure the cardiovascular system. They're trying to see if their testosterone level would fluctuate like it does in males. And what they determined was that it doesn't fluctuate. So the ones that were more dominant had a higher testosterone level. And the ones that were submissive, remember they had 10 submissive women and 10 dominant women. And the ones that were more submissive had a lower testosterone level. Okay. So that part was taken care of. Then they looked at the cardiovascular system, and they saw that it fluctuated with the stressors. And the stressor they had was a debate. They were having a debate with a trained professional. Okay, so what's the next question that we have to answer? The sample. So what was the sample in this one? It's right there in the abstract. It tells you what the sample was. What was the sample?
The students,
Right. How many?
20.
20. 20 submissive, 20 dominant. Okay. So that's the sample. So you just write down 20. You can write down 20 dominant, 10 submissive, 20 students in the sample, 10 dominant and 10 submissive, if you like. Describe the target population. In this case, the target population were students, undergraduate students. How were they selected? Random sample. It said it was a random sample anyway.
And you said it was 100, right?
Out of 100 students, yeah, they had 100 students, exactly. Okay, and this question is one that will be variable. The next question states, do you think there was evidence of bias in the sample selection that may influence the findings of the study? Now this is your own interpretation of the article. Is 20 enough women to test for us to say that this is a generality that we can talk about other women? All women are the same, because we looked at 20 women at Wake Forest University to determine whether this was true or not. Would you say that's true?
I think that's a good number.
20? 20, is that enough?
I don't know. Talk about the whole
I would think
US.
you would need more.
So you want more, but you think it's okay. Well, it really all depends. on how you feel. You think it's enough? If you said it was enough, and you said it wasn't, and that's okay. I mean, you can disagree with one another, and that's
I
fine.
mean, you would also, wouldn't you take in consideration of people's ethnic backgrounds too?
Ah, good point. So let's see if they describe who these people are. If we look at methods on page 37, at the beginning of the fall semester, so this is in the fall, 20 undergraduate women were randomly selected from a pool of 100 students at Wake Forest University. These two groups represented the top and bottom quintiles, from scores on the dominant subscale of the adjectives checklist. Table 1 provides descriptive data relevant to the ACL for each group. Okay, they don't give us much more information, do they?
No.
Nope, that's it.
So they use the ACL weight and the percentage of fat, is that what they use? That's what it says in table 1.
Right. Right, age in years, the median was 18.5. So these are teenage girls. 18.9 for one group and 18.2 for the other group. So they're not just undergraduates, they're freshmen. Right? I mean, they're only 18 years old. So these are young girls. Is it looking a little stranger? I mean, since we're only looking at 18-year-olds, we're not even looking at 20-year-olds, or 25-year-olds, or 30-year-olds. Should we look at women over a spectrum? Well, we didn't. We only looked at 18-year-olds. We don't know their ethnic background. They don't give that information. We don't know their place of origin. Are these all, the Wake Forest is in the South. Are these all Southern women? Is that important? Would you find the same, would you get the same results here on this, on the reservation? Would you get the same results on another reservation?
I doubt it.
Are all Indians the same? Let's vote. How many people think all Indians are the same? No?
No.
I was just curious. All right. This is a recurring topic with me. How many Indian tribes are there in the United States? I looked it up yesterday. As of yesterday, there's 573.
Oh, so was it over 500, right? Federally
And you would be,
recognized.
you would be accurate. 573 Indian tribes, or indigenous peoples, nations, tribal groupings, however you like to look at it. Anyway, that's a lot of different people.
But the way they, isn't that number only the tribes that are, like I said, federally recognized?
Federally recognized tribes, 573. And Navajos are, yeah, okay. That leaves 572 other groups who aren't Navajo. However, there are other groups that speak Athabascan, the Athabascan language. There's the Hoopa in California. Apaches speak an Athabascan language. There's a group back east that speak an Athabascan language. And that's the curious one. Why in the world is that group over there and everybody else is over here? I mean, that's kind of curious. Anyway, okay, so that's a question that we answered. Let's see another question that we're going to answer. So what do you think? 20, is that enough? We don't have a whole lot of information about these individuals except that they're 18 years old. Is 18 a good age? Are they mature yet? Well, they're 18. Is that old enough? Probably not.
And like the thing too is, like we said, like it depends on where they came from as well.
Sure. So if they came from a more submissive area, like the South, then potentially maybe their definition of submissive is completely different than it would be if this research was done in New York City or California or Chicago or here on the reservation. Are women on this reservation more dominant or are they more submissive?
Dominant.
They're more dominant. It's a matrilineal society. So women tend to have a dominant personality. However, so yesterday I was talking to an individual that lives in Snowflake. And his nephews come from Snowflake. And his nephews are here now, going to school. And one of the things they're discovering is that they are pushier, they are more dominant than most of the people here from the reservation. Because they grew up in a white society where being aggressive is rewarded. So they're far more aggressive than the people around them. That's curious. I don't know if that's that curious. Anyway, that's what they discovered. Which has nothing to do with this article. Okay. Okay, so what's the next question we have? So how do you guys feel about the sample? Is there any bias in this? Any potential bias in this article? It's really up to you. I mean, you can see it as bias if you like. 20 is not a bad number. It's not very high, but it's still not a very bad number. I mean, this is a question for you. It's not a question that I'm going to argue with you on. I just want you to do it. I want you to learn how to read these things, and I want you to make your own determinations. The reason we're doing this exercise is so that you learn how to read research articles. That's what I want you to do. Research is the linchpin of psychology. Without research, we wouldn't know anything. This is a piece of information that deals with cardiovascular reactions to stressors for women. One of the things that we know about women is that women have estrogen, and estrogen tends to protect them from heart disease. So if this were a male, of course, the dominant male would have reproductive rights, but at the same time, he's going to croak from a heart attack at 53. So we know that. Women are protected by estrogen, which is kind of exciting if you're a female, of course, because you're being protected. So the probability of them dying at 53 from a heart attack isn't very high. If they die from a heart attack, it's probably after they go through menopause, whenever that may happen to be. Menopause usually has to do with genetics. Some women will go through menopause in their 40s, some in their 50s. I knew a lady in Oklahoma who was in her 70s and she was still having her monthly period. Oh, she was a hoot. She was fun. And she had already buried 2 husbands, and she was working on her 3rd. She was so cool. And she called her sexual parts her hoo-hoo, which I thought was just a...
Huh?
Where is the book say?
It's just right there. Like,
Okay.
as soon as you come in the thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the question is there any
Follow this.
Any,
Close the main door.
bias? Do you think that it ever... Okay. The next question, describe how this data was collected, identifying any problems, concerns with the data collection. We didn't really look at that part, but sometimes they use instruments, and we're not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure if those instruments are accurate. I mean, they can say that this proves that this is a stressor, but what they're doing is they're asking them questions and having them fill things out. If you've ever been to the emergency room, a lot of times in the emergency room they'll have you fill out a questionnaire about depression. Okay, and that you self-identify yourself as being depressed. Well, if you don't want to be depressed, then you lie, and people do that. Or you have the halo effect. I think more positively about myself. Maybe I am depressed, but of course I'm not going to tell anybody. So, I mean, you lie, and that's one of the problems with these self-disclosure questionnaires. And of course, they did use a questionnaire to determine if the women were submissive or dominant. Now, this is in 1990. This article was written in 1990, and the research was done in 1990, the fall semester of 1990. So the question is, in Wake Forest, which is in Tennessee, in Wake Forest, do women want to be dominant or do they want to be submissive? These are Southern women. If they want to be submissive, if they want to seem submissive, they will probably not tell the truth on the questionnaire. So maybe they're not as submissive as they say they are. Hi, Darnell. See you, Darnell. Okay. I didn't think he was going to wave at it. He's smiling now. See you later. Okay. So there's a lot of things to think about. I mean, when you read these articles, and sometimes you have to have information that goes beyond what's in the article. Sometimes they pretend that all these individuals are just a general group from all over the United States. In reality, it's just people from New York, it's just people from the Midwest, it's just people from the South. I don't know. I mean, we're talking about 20 people, and they chose them from 100. And of course, Wake Forest is a major university from around the United States. Were all their dominant women Northerners? I mean, it is a regional college, university, but it's also a national college. So they would have students from all over. And what was going on in the 1990s? I don't know. Would it be different from today? Lots of things to think about. Okay, what's the next question we have to answer? Oh, jeez. This is driving me crazy. What's the next question we have to answer? The analysis of the data identify the statistical tests that were used. The reason I put that in there is because I want you to get used to looking at the statistical data you don't have to understand it. Only statisticians understand this stuff anyway. I'll say, crap. I didn't though. So the question is, what kind of statistical tests did they use? Well, if you look at cardiovascular responses, we see that they use an ANCOVA. And that's all you'd have to say, okay? And that has to do with measuring the variance. They used an ANCOVA. Now, one of the problems with statistics, they use such strange names for all of their things that you guys go, oh my God, it's an ANCOVA, I don't know what that is. And of
That's what I was
course,
gonna ask you, does it stand for something?
yeah, it is. It's an acronym that stands for analysis of covariance.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's right there. I'm glad it was there because I couldn't remember what it was. Okay, I don't teach statistics. If I did teach statistics, I could rattle these things off like crazy, but I don't teach statistics. I try to stay away from them just like everybody else does. But I want you to understand that a lot of times they use different methods of doing statistics. Don't worry about this. This isn't something to worry about, okay? I just want you to get used to seeing these words. Okay. Statisticians, as we know, statisticians seem to be able to give you any information that they want to give you. So however they want something to come out, it tends to come out that way. But that's because they are statisticians. And they have different methods of doing these things. So it's good to get used to seeing them. And that's all I want. I don't want you to understand it. You don't have to understand it. Because you won't understand it until you take statistics. And then you probably won't understand it. Okay. Don't tell the statisticians that's simple. I don't teach that class. I hope I don't teach that class.
I think you just recorded it though.
Yeah, I know, I just recorded it, they can look at it. And it's going to go on YouTube and, yeah, this afternoon, so I'm SOL, I guess. What were the reported findings of the study? You need to get the final results, and the final results say the more dominant women had a higher cardiovascular, they reacted more negatively to stress. They had higher levels of their cardiovascular system reacted more strongly to the stressors. What does that mean? That means that they'll die of a heart attack at 69 or 75 or whatever. And the submissive women, if they're not beaten to death by their husbands or their significant others, then they may live into their 80s or 90s because their cardiovascular system isn't as stressed out. Okay. Is that the end? Is that the last question to answer? Were the findings statistically significant? A lot of times you'll find the research there weren't any significant statistics. That has to do with statistics, to find out if something is significant or not. I did my own study. I was dealing with resilience on an Indian reservation, which wasn't here. And I was looking at 6 different factors to find out what led to resilience. One of the factors had to do with age. One of the factors had to do with education. So I was measuring their resilience, and I wanted to find out if more education made you more resilient, if older people were more resilient than younger people, if you had gone through a lot of trauma, did that decrease your resilience level? Culture, I measured their culture to find out if culture was a factor, and there was one more that I always forget. Anyway, so I was looking at all these different variables, and what I discovered was that the only variable what variable do you think made an impact? The only one that was significant. All the rest of them were insignificant, statistically. What leads to resilience? This was an American Indian population.
Maybe adaption?
Okay. Well, actually, I wasn't
Maybe it's
I was measuring age, I was measuring education. Gender, I measured gender. Are women more resilient than men? What else did I measure? Trauma and culture. So which one? There was only one. Actually, there were 2 that were kind of interesting. But the rest of them had no effect on resilience.
Culture?
Culture. It was culture. So if somebody had a strong culture, they had a high resilience level. That was interesting. Age didn't matter, gender didn't matter, education didn't matter. Of course, I'm an educator, so I was hoping, let's go to college, so we'll build your resilience up. But it didn't happen that way. Now, one of the interesting, this was kind of interesting because we had discovered this in other research done in this area. One of the things we discovered was the trauma did not matter. So if you had been through a lot of trauma, your resilience level was not affected. Now this is really kind of interesting because of all the populations that we've looked at, we've measured trauma and resilience. If it was a white population, then the more trauma they'd been through, then the less resilient they were. If it was an African population, the more trauma they'd gone through, the lower their resilience level. However, in 3 different studies, mine and 2 others, one was done on the Hopi Reservation, the other was done on the Navajo Reservation. In 3 different studies, we discovered that trauma with American Indians does not lower your resilience level. As curious as that is.
What, like how, you mean such as in cultural ways? Is that what
You
or is
mean
it just in overall,
trauma? Well, we measured trauma. We found out how much trauma they'd been through. Had they been sexually molested as a child? Were they abused as a child?
and it never affected?
And it didn't affect their resilience level.
Okay.
I know. There is a reason, we're not exactly sure what we didn't measure that, we couldn't determine that, but of course we could speculate. Why in the world would American Indians, trauma not bother American Indians while it almost destroys other populations?
Yeah, the way I think about it, Native Americans have a higher percentage of people that are alcoholics.
So you think the alcohol did it?
I think alcoholism, it kind of ruins your resilience, doesn't it? Those traumas,
then it
lead
should
to
lower it.
something to
It
that?
should lower your resilience.
Yeah,
Okay, but it didn't.
it didn't?
No.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the American Indians that I measured had a higher resilience level than any other group that had been measured, except for old people in Washington State. The initial study had a higher, they were the only ones that had a higher resilience level on the average than the group that I did my research on. That was they had a higher resilience level. You know. Maybe it's because you've been through so much trauma in the last 200 or 300 years, you know, as you, being with the European incursion, that you've had to develop resilience, and the ones that couldn't handle it died,
Yeah.
and the ones that are left are the tough ones. Not only that, they sent you guys to boarding school. What a horrible situation that was, and of course that was fairly traumatic, being torn from your family, not being allowed to even communicate with your family over time. So potentially the only ones that survived were the ones that could handle the trauma. I don't know. This is all speculation because we can't measure it. Anyway, and the reason I did the resilience study was because there was a relatively high suicide rate. Now, we were trying to prove that this population was resilient so that we could tell them that.
Yeah.
That was the idea. So we could tell the kids, look, you're tough. Don't off yourself. Don't kill yourself. So it was, we were trying to fight against suicide. Anyway, okay, is that it? Why is finding statistically significant discussion? Did the conclusion of the study reflect the actual findings? And sometimes in these studies, they'll say, they will start talking about things that don't have anything to do with what they were measuring. And they will make all these strange claims. So that's what I want you to see. Not all research is good research. Some research, they just do it because they have to do it, otherwise they lose their job. So they just do research. It's called publish or perish, and that's what they force faculty members to do. Okay, so there you go. That's how you do an article critique. If you have any problems with this, please don't hesitate to ask me questions. I'll be glad to look at your research and see what I think. Not that that'll be absolute, of course. I don't have all the answers. I just have my answers, I guess. What I think is accurate. All right, let's see if we'll pick it up. Come on, pick it up. There we go. Oops, I touched it and it went away. Let's see if we can make that come back. Okay. Okay, so last time we were talking about evolution, maybe, and maybe we'll talk about evolution again today. There we go. Come on, pick it up. What is wrong with this thing? Okay. I'll read it from here. Okay, so we're talking about evolution. We're talking about evolution of behavior. One of the ways that we can look at evolution is by comparing different species. The assumption is, of course, that humans are at the end of an evolutionary scale. We aren't at the beginning of the scale, we're at the end of the scale. So there are species that are older than we are. As a matter of fact, we're one of the younger species. If we look at the primates, we can look at chimpanzees, we can look at the great apes. For some reason this isn't working, sorry. We can look at the great apes, and what we see is a population that probably we evolved from. They have the same structures that we have. So we can do research on those species to find out so that we can find out about humans. So a lot of times we do research with other species. You can't take a human and put him in a deep freeze, and this is what we used to do when I was in the service. We used to take beagles, those dogs, who had the same, very similar respiratory system to humans, and we used to put them through all kinds of horrible tests. And then we would euthanize them and do autopsies on them to find out how they reacted. And this was back in the 70s. We were trying to determine, we were thinking that we would probably be sending men into outer space. So that's what we were doing. We were torturing these dogs so that we could find out what would happen to humans in outer space, is what we were trying to determine. We were also trying to figure out how many G's could a human tolerate. So we would take these dogs, we'd weigh them, we would calibrate them, we'd spin them around. We did all kinds of horrible things to them. This is at Wright-Patt Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. And we would torture the dogs, and then we would euthanize them, do autopsies to determine what would happen to humans in that same circumstance, so that we didn't have to take a human and spin them around until they died. You know, we wouldn't want to do that. We didn't mind doing that to a dog, but we didn't want to do that with a human. And the guy that euthanized them, of course, these are dogs, right? These are puppies. These are our animals, and everybody loves their dogs. Or you don't, I don't know, maybe you hate your dog. But the guy that they got to euthanize them was a Laguna guy. He was from Laguna, Pueblo. They couldn't find any white people to do it because it bothered him so much. But the guy from Laguna, Pueblo, he had no problems doing it. Euthanizing the beagles. Not that that means anything about people from the Laguna, Pueblo. It just happened that while I was there, he was the one. And he was a good friend of mine. And he was the one that euthanized the beagles, as weird as that may seem. So one of the things we need to do is look at, come on, we need to determine what is good and what is bad for humans. We had it for a second, didn't we? For a nanosecond. There we go. As an individual grows, they develop the ability to respond to stimuli. Newborn babies, babies in the womb will respond to stimuli. We know that babies will respond to light. They'll respond to sound. Babies can hear. They can taste. All of their senses are being developed. And so all of these senses are functioning. So a baby can actually hear what's going on. It doesn't understand what's going on, but it can hear noises. It can hear music. And this is one of the reasons they say, you know, play music, play Mozart, and the baby's brain will develop in a certain way. My son is a mathematician. I don't know if you know anything about mathematicians, but their brains are just different. There's something about the mathematical brain. I had a friend in college, he had a triple major. He was a math major, he was a music major. Music, that makes sense as far as mathematics is concerned because everything has to go together correctly. It's like adding and subtracting, it's like multiplying, it's like dividing. So music made sense as far as mathematics was concerned. His third major was in religion.
Oh,
Religion. Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about mathematics, you're thinking inside a specific structure, right? Music is kind of the same way. You can only make select noises. So you're limited as to what is music, what is mathematics, and religion is kind of the same way. Religion sets boundaries, tells you what you can believe and what you can't believe, sets everything into a box. And we're going to talk about, well, we're going to talk about that in the other class. But, so religion kind of does the same thing. And I always found it interesting that this individual who wrote symphonies, who could do any math problem, and if you've ever looked at my son's math texts, you know how crazy some of these questions are. They don't have any numbers. What's the answer? Well, it's ax minus 3 over, you know, zyt or something. Come on. That doesn't mean anything, you know. But So he could do any math problem, he wrote symphonies, and guess what he majored in as a graduate student? Guess what? He's a professor of what? Mathematics, music, religion? Religion. I know it drove me crazy. This man who wrote symphonies became a professor of religion. And not just any religion, he's a Lutheran, and Lutherans are kind of, it's not really fair if you're a Catholic, but they're kind of like Catholics, and he decided he wanted to become Amish. You can't convert to the Amish faith. They don't let you do that, it doesn't work. But he wanted to become Amish because of they have they have very strict rules, and you have to follow these rules, which seemed really odd to me because here he is, he's a mathematician, he writes symphonies, and of course he's trying to expand the realm of music, he's trying to expand the realm of mathematics, and so when he starts talking about religion, he encapsulates himself in a very tiny space. I thought that was kind of curious. And I had that conversation, which was interesting. He's written several texts. He teaches at Gustavus Adolphus College up in Minnesota. Out in Minnesota, eh? I bought his book, but I couldn't get through it. Sorry. That's about religion, and he talks about religion like there's only one way to do everything. As curious as that is. Okay. As the organism becomes more and more complex and other variables are introduced, behavior and responses will change. If you were raised in the city, in an apartment, and you never got to go outside, too dangerous to go outside, you're up on the 17th floor, your environment is totally different than it would be if you lived on a farm in Iowa, where I live now. Or if you lived on a sheep ranch here on the Navajo reservation. Or if you lived in San Diego, where it's hot as hell in the
The
summertime.
ocean breeze.
Oh, it's like paradise. Somebody told me it's the best place in the whole wide world, San
Well,
Diego. It's like you never have a winter.
on the police cars, it says America's finest,
There you go.
which I don't agree with them, but I got my own thing with them. But it is nice, I mean, it's perfect
that's-
weather year round.
That's what I was told. I used to teach at Ashford University. They moved their college from Clinton, Iowa, where there's actual winter, to San Diego. So if you, 2 or 3 years ago, if you watched a San Diego Padres baseball game, there was a big sign, Ashford University on the back. In Petco Park.
Yeah,
In the
it's
stadium.
downtown.
Yeah, there you go. And they've got an Ashford building down there. They make millions and millions of dollars a year. Wait a minute, this is an educational institution. How can they make millions and millions of dollars a year? And the answer is, of course, it's a for-profit institution, so they were making lots and lots of money. This change that people have, or that they go through, is known as ontogeny. So it all depends on your environment. One of the things that happened to me as I was growing up, I grew up on a farm in Indiana, and I never really left. We visited Chicago. I had an aunt that lived in Chicago. We went to St. Louis, went to the zoo. She was out in San Diego for a while. We went to the San Diego Zoo, which is a fabulous place. San Diego Zoo is fabulous.
The whole place, Balboa Park, all the museums.
Gorgeous place. Don't ever go.
I've
It's too crowded. It is crowded. San Diego, it's very crowded. And the drivers are nuts. There's a lot of insanity in that city. And they all drive cars. Or maybe they're normal until they
No,
do.
you got
It's normal to
two of the
you.
latest freeways, 805, 15, 5, you know?
And Los Angeles is worse because, well, they don't drive, they just kind of sit in their cars and wait for somebody to move. So there's not a lot of driving that takes place. Anyway, so it all depends on where you come from. When I was growing up, I lived on a farm. We hardly ever went any place. Indiana was the only place that I knew, except for Chicago and St. Louis and San Diego. But we went on vacation, and every time we went on vacation, we saw how different other places were. And we realized that Indiana was the greatest place in the whole wide world, which it is actually. But that has to do with where I grew up. If you live on the reservation and you've never been off the reservation, this is the greatest place in the whole wide world. Because it's the only place in the whole wide world, as far as you're concerned. And that's known as ontogeny. And that's okay. Everybody has the same reaction. San Diego is paradise. I was told that by somebody who had gone to Pepperdine, which is up near Los Angeles. But he was from San Diego. He hated Malibu. That's Pepperdine's over by
Yeah, it's rude.
Malibu.
They're
Yeah.
assholes.
Where else did he go? He went to Occidental? Yeah, Occidental's out there too. That's where Obama went. Obama went to Occidental. This is known as ontogeny, how an individual changes over lifetime. And of course, I lived in Indiana, I grew up on a farm, and then I joined the military. And one of the things I noticed was that there were other individuals, and despite the fact they didn't come from the farm like I did, they were very similar to me. They were, of course, we all had the same, we were all doing the same thing. So they weren't bad people. I mean, just because they didn't come from the farm, they weren't bad people. They were also of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, which was kind of curious. I grew up in an industrial city, Muncie, Indiana, and it was about 20% black. I told this story before. And I didn't realize that they were different. I thought, they're Hoosiers. We're all Hoosiers, aren't we? Well, you're not, but we were. And so I palled around with a lot of African-American gentlemen who talked and acted just like I did. Of course, their experience was completely different than mine, because there's a degree of prejudice against them, and they reacted to that. I didn't recognize it because I wasn't experiencing it. The history of a species tells us the evolutionary determinants of its behavior. The history of an individual tells us the developmental determinants. So, one of the interesting things about people that grew up in my generation, I was born in 1949, so my teeth developed in the 1950s. Well, they didn't have fluoride toothpaste until the middle of the 1950s. So when I was brushing my teeth as a child, we weren't using fluoride toothpaste. It was just an abrasive. It was a cleanser. So one of the things that happened to me was that I scraped off a lot of my enamel off the surface of my teeth. And then then they had fluoride toothpaste which tasted really bad. You know how Crest tastes now, how bad Crest tastes now. Well, in the old days, Crest had a lot more fluoride in it than it has today. They weren't exactly sure how much to put in there. Now, if you are young, you can go to the dentist and they can put some kind of a covering over your teeth. It's one of the reasons why they talk about white teeth all the time. It really irritates me, because when I was growing up, we didn't have that. And we lost our enamel fairly readily, and we had all these cavities. I mean, all this horrible stuff was happening to our teeth. So if you see somebody who's in their 50s and 60s and 70s, a lot of these individuals don't have very nice teeth. If you watch an old movie, most of these people don't have good teeth. And the ones that do have good teeth are probably false. So Clark Gable, of course, had false teeth. most of his life, which is kind of interesting. But people have really gorgeous teeth, and I'm really jealous. My mother was a tooth person. She looked at two things. No, she looked at your teeth. That's pretty much it. So we went to the dentist all the time, and of course he tortured us, and I had really bad teeth, and so I'm really upset. I had a brother with really nice teeth. I want to punch his teeth out and then put them in my mouth. You can't do that. Anyway, he has nice teeth. I'm jealous of my younger brother with his nice teeth, but he has an overbite, which I wouldn't want the overbite, but that's the way it works. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about developmental determinants. The scientists must regard the organism as a machine made up of billions of neurons, and if we see it that way, of course, then we are able to fix it. We can fix it just like we fix a machine. So when you go in to see the doctor looks at you and you say, I've got a stomach ache. So he starts looking at your stomach as if it's a mechanical structure. Are you pumping out too much acid? Are you not digesting your food properly? Are you under stress and so you're not getting rid of the food in your stomach and it's souring in your stomach? Lots of different reasons for something to happen. Is there a tumor? Do you have an ulcer? There's a lot of different things that we can look at, but he's looking at it from a mechanical point of view. That's the way doctors work. And he wants to fix you. And the best way to fix you is just like a mechanic fixing a car. He fixes one thing. And if that takes care of the problem, then we're okay. That's the way your mechanic works. I had to take my Miata in over the summer. The key wasn't working. I have a key fob, and it wasn't working. The doors have an automatic lock on them. You can just touch them, and they lock. And it wasn't working. So they tried something first, and that kind of worked, but it didn't work completely. And then they tried something else, and that didn't work at all. And then they traded computer components, and that didn't work. And they kept my car for 2 weeks. In the summertime, it's a convertible. I know, I was pissed. Finally, I got my car back. And they did fix it. I can't remember what. Oh, it was a wire. It was a wire that was loose, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it made contact, and sometimes it didn't. So they changed all of these components in the car, trying to figure out what was wrong, and it was a loose wire that they never looked at until, after 2 weeks, and me calling up and yelling at them. Well, not really, I did not. If you yell at them, they put your car in the back of the garage and don't work on it. That's my theory anyway. A major goal of biological psychology is to use research findings to improve the health and well-being of humans and other animals. We're trying to determine what the problem is. We're trying to determine how we can fix people. We want everybody to be happy. But first we have to define what is happy. What is happy? Does it mean not being sad? Is it the absence of sadness? Is it being with somebody who makes you laugh? Is that happy? Kids make me happy.
Everybody's different.
Everybody is. But I'm a psychologist and I have to fix you. I have to make you not unhappy. So how am I going to do that when this is happy is such a variable? I mean, you can't even define it. As horrible as that is. So since we can't define it, how in the world are we going to do it? Does it mean you have a high serotonin level? I mean, we can increase your serotonin level. If you think you're depressed, we can increase your serotonin level. But you can increase your serotonin level by exercising. Damn it. So as a psychologist, how in the world do I talk you out of being unhappy? I've been divorced twice. The first time I got a divorce, I lost a lot of weight. I went down to 117 pounds, which is a lot of weight. Yeah, but my ex-wife was not a very nice person. I was better off without her. But I was still reacting to the situation, and I lost lots of weight. I went down to 117. You can imagine 117 pounds of this. Yeah, I was skinny.
At least you meditate, right?
Yeah, good point. I was actually underweight. I was in the military at the time. But when I fell out of a helicopter, I didn't get hurt because I didn't weigh hardly anything. So,
It's kind of floated.
yeah, I kind of floated like a mouse. You can throw a mouse off of the third floor building and it doesn't hurt them because they're not very heavy. Numerous human diseases involve malfunctioning of the brain, and of course, anytime something happens to you, if you get depressed, if you're eating the wrong foods, potentially this is going to change the functioning in your brain. And if it changes the functioning of your brain, now all of a sudden we've got a mental illness. So what are we going to do next? Well, if I'm a doctor and I talk to you for 15 minutes and you tell me you're depressed, I'm going to throw Prozac at you. Sure, that ought to work. Raise your serotonin level. It's going to take 6 weeks. But that's okay. We're going to raise your serotonin level. In 6 weeks, you'll be feeling better. Well, whatever it was that was making you depressed may be gone by then. Uh-oh. So now I'm brilliant because your life has changed anyway. And so I've fixed you. I've cured you. Or maybe you're one of those perpetually grouchy people, and no matter what kind of drugs I give you, you're still going to be mad and angry and depressed. So how in the world do we talk people out of that? There are some mental illnesses that we cannot fix. Antisocial personality disorder, we can't do anything about that. Narcissistic personality disorder, we can't do anything about that either. We can't do anything about borderline. Borderline people think they're okay. Antisocial personality people that suffer from that, they think they're okay. People with narcissistic personality disorder love themselves, and why in the world would they ever stop loving themselves? They love themselves over everybody else. Is that okay? We see them as dominant people. Well, you may see them as dominant people, but they have narcissistic personality disorder. Their focus is on themselves instead of other people. Is that okay? Shouldn't we take care of ourselves before we take care of everybody else? To what extent is the question? How can these people ever have children? Because they compete with their own children. I know, it's terrible. What are we going to do with them? How do you fix them? Well, you can't fix them. You can't convince them that they're wrong. Same way with the personality, people with antisocial personality disorder. There are 3 ways to look at brain behavior relations. You can look at it from somatic intervention. Somatic means body. It means the body itself. Changes in body changes your behavior. So if my wife, she was in that Bradley vehicle accident. Her hips were hurting her. Her knee hurt, her wrists hurt, her neck hurt. It changed her behavior. She wasn't the same person she was before. Then she had surgery to replace her hips. Now she has titanium hips.
Hey,
Well, I mean,
it works great.
but it changed her behavior. Changed it completely. She ain't the same person she was before. For one thing, you can't go through surgery when they put you through anesthesia. It changes your brain to some extent. You get what they call surgical brain.
And those changes from that, are they like permanent?
No.
No?
No. So if let's say that your cousin talks you into taking crystal meth. Sweet fellow that he is. And you take crystal meth. Well, that changes the structure in your brains. In your brain. It makes you stupid. You get what they call meth head.
Yeah.
You're not real smart. And that's going to last for about 18 months. Okay. So if you use meth for, I don't know, a month, you've got 18 months of stupid in front of you. Where you don't quite get things, lights bother your eyes, you have restructured your brain. And your brain has to repair itself. And it takes about 18 months for that to happen.
How long
So,
does it take with the TBA?
yeah, it is. It's actually very similar to the situation. Sure. And sometimes that is permanent. And sometimes it heals. We just have to see what happens.
Well, I've been like
You'll get
10
better.
years.
No, you do get better. You do get better.
Back in the 09 with the IED.
Yeah, I know.
So
And it's not, doesn't seem to be getting better, it seems to be getting worse, is the question.
I still get the migraines,
Yeah.
headaches, I still forget things.
I forget things. I called somebody by the wrong name the other day. That kills me when I do that.
I can't remember names.
Evidently, I can't either. Of course, I've never hit my head that hard. Thank goodness. So somatic intervention, changes in the body, changes behavior. Behavioral intervention, psychological changes occur, and this changes body structure or function. Because you are depressed, you're not exercising as much, now all of a sudden you've gained a little bit of weight. And since you gained a little bit of weight, your knees don't work as well as they used to. So because of the depression, you've gained weight and now your joints aren't working as well as they did before. So that's the behavioral intervention. Correlation, how do changes in the somatic variables. Wants to borrow money. You think I'm kidding? He doesn't know my class schedule. Correlation, how do changes in somatic variables affect behavioral variables? And of course, that's the big question. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. If we increase testosterone in a male, will it increase his sexual response? What do you think? Freud tried this. Freud decided, Freud was dealing with people who were homosexual. And they didn't want to be homosexual anymore. Or somebody didn't want them to be homosexual anymore. So he decided that he was going to give them testosterone to make them more male. If we make them more male, they won't be gay anymore. Of course, that wasn't a term they used back then. So he increased their testosterone level. What happened? Any ideas? If we increase a male's testosterone level, what happens to it? If we give males a shot of testosterone, and we do, we give males shots of testosterone from time to time. We had a guy that, oh geez, how can I explain this? We had a guy that had a low T. You used to see these commercials on television. They wanted you to measure your testosterone level so you'd go in and get a shot. He had low T, and he wanted to have sex with his wife on the weekend. So he would come in on Wednesday, we'd give him a shot of testosterone, and so that he could function on Saturday, as strange as that sounds. So what happens if we increase the testosterone level in males?
Maybe a little bit more aggressive, maybe?
They'd be more aggressive, they'd also have a stronger sex drive. Testosterone, it turns out that there's several different types of testosterone. But one of the types of testosterone gives you your sex drive. Gives both males and females sex drive. And that's the reason why we were looking at testosterone in the research that we were talking about before. They were looking at testosterone to find out if their testosterone level fluctuated with stress. Because in males, if we increase, when they're under stress, their testosterone increases. When males have testicles, and testicles have a lot more testosterone than ovaries do. Ovaries pump out all kinds of interesting hormones, and some of them are female hormones, and there is a degree of male hormones. And what they discovered was that the submissive women had a lower testosterone level. If they had looked at it, they would have found out that the submissive women also had lower sex drive than the dominant women. Can we cause the same effect? Okay, so Freud thought he would cure these homosexual males by giving them testosterone. So what happened? They had a stronger sex drive. They wanted to have more sex. It worked. He fixed them. No, he didn't.
No.
They wanted to have more sex with men. Didn't change their sexual orientation.
Just his sex drive.
It did change their sex drive, of course. Okay. That's what he discovered. And Freud complained that he could fix anything except homosexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's nothing I can do. I know, he lost a lot of clients when that happened. Can we cause the same effect by electrically stimulating the brain? Can we increase somebody's sex drive by stimulating the brain? What do you think? We've done this experiment. It's kind of with rats. Of course, we did it with rats.
I'll say yes.
Yeah, we can. If we stimulate the hypothalamus, we can increase somebody's sex drive. If we electrically stimulate it, we can stimulate the the rats. If we cut his vagus nerve, will he lack sexual response? Your vagus nerve controls a lot of things. One of them is sex drive. One of them has to do with heart rate. So if we cut your vagus nerve, but we need to cut it low enough so it doesn't kill you. Okay. He still has sexual response, but he doesn't have, it's not spontaneous. Okay. But he still has sexual response. As we discovered with quadriplegics in combat, they can still get an erection. They can still have sex, but their sexual response is not as spontaneous as it was before. If we put two adults of opposite sex together, will it lead to an increased secretion of certain hormones? So if we put males and females in the same room, will it increase their hormone level?
Maybe.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, even if there's no attraction.
Or any type of physical,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Yeah, just being in the same room will increase hormone levels, as bizarre as that may seem. So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean a whole lot. Society tells us how to respond appropriately. How am I doing on time?
10,
4
16.
months.
16, I have 4 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, I can do it. Okay, can you change the blood flow to the brain with select visual stimuli? Of course, we do that with pornography. That's what pornography is all about. So yes, you can change your hormone levels. Come on in, that's okay.
Really?
No, you're early by 4 minutes.
Okay.
If we change the circumstance of the interaction to include dangerous stimulation, will it cause a change in response of the individuals? Dangerous stimulation increases your adrenaline level. Is that going to change your hormones? Yeah, if we give you a shot of adrenaline, all of a sudden you're going to start having extreme reactions. So the answer is yes. So danger. Men and women who are together in a dangerous situation, a lot of times they interpret it as I've fallen in love with this individual. We see this in movies all the time. But it's true. Dangerous situations will give people stronger emotions. And they assume that it's about each other, as bizarre as that sounds. It's not that bizarre. So if we go through a traumatic situation, then potentially we will feel like we're madly in love with each other. Looking at people with frequent sexual response, will we find higher levels of hormones if they have more sexual response?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. You guys uncomfortable with this topic?
Well,
No.
Are we okay? Okay. I don't want to make anybody feel bad. Okay. Can we correlate high levels of hormones with frequent sexual response? So if you have high levels of hormones, does that mean you're going to have a lot of sex?
No.
No. It's appropriate behavior. Depends on the culture. Okay. As odd or strange as that may seem. And there's a reason why I put this guy in here. He's tall. He's so tall he has to lean over just to come down the damn stairs. Okay, so what does height have to do with hormones? Or does it have anything to do with hormones? Just body structure? Actually, this all has to do with genetics. So you either have a high hormone level or a low hormone level. one of the things that we've discovered is that tall men tend to have lower hormone levels, as strange as that may seem. But they're thought of as more attractive to women. Now, there may be a reason why this is true. Wait a minute, I thought I had the answer. Okay, so women think that tall men are more attractive than men who aren't as tall. I was gonna say short,
I
but
was
it
like,
makes them cry. So why would you think, okay, so the actual answer is that short men tend to be more aggressive than tall men. All right, and this all has to do with hormones, I know, it's kind of bizarre, isn't it strange? I know, but women are more attracted to that guy. Why are they more attracted to him? Because he's less aggressive. So you find him more, less off-putting because he's less aggressive. When my wife was in, I've run out of time, haven't I?
Yes.
Okay, I'll stop. I will tell you a story about my wife and all of her gay male friends. Okay. Oh, my poor wife, I feel sorry. A little bit, maybe not. Hold on. Oh, I gotta turn that thing on.